I swapped my cheating husband's lube for glue, and the firefighters had to pull them apart. I got into my husband's car and found a tube of personal lubricant in the glove compartment. I didn't say a word. I just secretly replaced it with industrial superglue. And what happened next forced our neighbors to make an emergency call to the fire department. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. And tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's traveled. I sat at the kitchen table. The silence in the house as thick as morning fog. A silence that had become a constant, unwelcome guest. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless accusatory rhythm. Each beat a painful reminder of a life I was beginning to suspect was a beautiful, meticulously crafted lie. My husband Julian had just returned from one of his countless business dinners. He looked not merely exhausted, but haunted, as if he carried the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. His face was a map of fatigue and guilt, lines etched around his eyes and mouth that had never been there before. He tossed his jacket on the sofa with a weariness that felt performative. He loosened his tie as if it were a noose he was desperate to escape. Then he collapsed onto the bed. The familiar springs groaned under his weight. He didn't even bother to shower. The faint scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, but it was mixed with a new alien fragrance. A sweet floral perfume that felt like an intrusion. A brazen confession from a life I didn't know he was living. A few minutes later, the gentle hum of his snoring filled the house. A sound that once brought me comfort, but now felt like a mocking lullaby. A lullaby for a fool. I got up, moving with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 43 years. I began to tidy up the mess he'd left in the living room. His jacket, his wallet, his cell phone, his old laptop. The phone screen was still on. A new email glowing like a sinister omen. I frowned. Julian never used email. He always said, "Rosemary, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call." But now an email. It was right there in plain sight. A digital ghost from a life I didn't know he was leading. Out of a morbid curiosity that felt both wrong and necessary, I opened it. The message was short. A mere handful of words that would shatter my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was followed by a red heart. A symbol of affection that pierced my own heart with a cold, sharp ache. I froze as if someone had slapped me. The digital world a cruel mirror reflecting a truth I was too terrified to see. Dad. The word echoed in my mind. Who was calling him that? And in such an intimate, affectionate tone? I swiped down, my thumb trembling, looking for more clues. But there was nothing. Just a strange email address. A jumble of meaningless characters that offered no answers, only more questions. A shiver ran through me, not from cold, but from a profound, bone-deep fear. It felt like a cold wind coming in through a crack in the door of my life, revealing a secret chamber I never knew existed. I glanced at the bedroom and saw Julian turn over with a sputtering snore, his face still and peaceful. A stark and infuriating contrast to the storm raging inside me. My heart pounded like a thief's, a frantic, guilty beat. I quickly put the phone back, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. I continued cleaning up, my movements now mechanical, robotic. I gathered his dirty clothes to take to the laundry. As I checked his pant pockets, I felt a folded piece of paper, crisp and new. It was a receipt from a fancy steakhouse in San Antonio dated that very night. I frowned. San Antonio? He had told me he was meeting his partners in Dallas. A tiny bitter laugh escaped my lips. Julian hated driving to Dallas. San Antonio, on the other hand, was where his mother had lived before she passed away. He had fond memories there, a fact he had often reminded me of. But who had he had dinner with in San Antonio while lying to me about being in Dallas? The receipt showed a party of two. A bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon. A wine he had bought me for our 10th anniversary. A wine I had never forgotten. And main courses of filet and pasta. I tried to remember the last time Julian took me to a place like that. Maybe 10 years ago when I opened my first bakery. It was a memory etched in my mind. The flickering candlelight, his proud smile, the way he toasted my success. Now that memory was a lie. A faded photograph in a scrapbook of deceit. But what I found next would change everything I believed about my marriage forever. I took out my own phone and with a silent, determined resolve snapped a picture of the receipt and the email. I didn't want to believe it, But a woman's intuition, a wife of 43 years' intuition, is a deep primal knowing. Something was going on and I had to find out what it was. My hands were trembling not just with anger, but with a deep existential dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to witness the spectacular collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Julian's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and that faint sweet perfume from his clothes. I opened the door, a small cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my flashlight and checked every corner of the driver's seat. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just some loose change and an empty water bottle. But as I reached into the passenger side glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out and my heart almost stopped. A tube of used personal lubricant with dried residue on the cap. A sticky, damning piece of evidence. I stood there in the dark garage, staring at it as if it were a dirty secret. A tangible manifestation of my worst fears. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always said he was tired, that age had sapped his desire. So what was this lubricant for? The question echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to my fragile reality. I felt paralyzed but kept a clear head, a survival instinct kicking in. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I wiped my hands with a napkin, scrubbing them raw, as if I were afraid the betrayal would leave a permanent mark on my skin. I continued searching, this time more carefully, more methodically. Under the back seat, I found some crumpled napkins soaked in a sweet floral perfume. The scent wasn't a man's fragrance and it wasn't my soft, familiar rose fragrance. The scent was alien, defiant. A loud, vulgar shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our garage. I took photos of everything. The lubricant, the napkins, as if I could capture the scent in an image. I closed the car and went back inside, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me, heavier than any flour sack I had ever lifted. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling uncontrollably as I picked up Julian's phone again. By this point, I was almost certain he was cheating on me. I checked his messages, but there were only work chats, cold and dry like a desert landscape. His inbox was empty, except for that one strange email. I checked the sent and draft folders. Nothing. Everything was too clean, too perfect, suspiciously so. As if he had erased every trace of his deception. A master of lies, I thought bitterly. My rage was now a cold, hard stone in my chest. And a new, more dangerous emotion began to stir within me. A desire for truth, a need to expose the lie, no matter the cost. The next morning, just as the sun rose and the soft light filtered through the window curtains, I was already awake. A ghost in my own house. The image of the lubricant, the restaurant receipt, and that email wouldn't stop swirling in my head. A venomous carousel of doubt. I stood in the kitchen, my hands busy, but my mind a frantic whirlwind. I made a simple breakfast. 2 fried eggs, some toast, and a cup of the strong black coffee Julian liked. I had barely slept all night. Julian came down looking tired, his hair a mess and his eyes still groggy. He sat at the table, grabbed his coffee cup, took a sip and set it down half full. "I have an important meeting today," he said in a husky voice. A rehearsed line he'd used countless times before without looking me in the eye. "I'm sure I'll be home late." He was so good at this, I thought. The easy lies, the casual tone. It made my blood run cold. I nodded with a strained smile, though all I wanted to do was scream. "Where is the meeting? With whom?" "In San Antonio again." But I held back, my rage a silent fire, and simply replied, "All right, be careful." He got up, gave me a light pat on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like an afterthought than a sign of affection, and left. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in silence, and me with a suspicion that was growing into a monstrous certainty. I cleared the table and washed the dishes one by one, the rhythm of the task, a small anchor in the storm of my emotions. I couldn't just sit there inventing theories. I needed the truth, hard evidence. I picked up my phone and looked for the number for Mrs. Miller, a friend from years ago who had helped me so much when I first opened the bakery. She had once told me about a good private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. "Rosemary, if you ever need it, I can give you Thomas's number," she had said. "He's very discreet and reliable." I never thought I would need to call him, but now I had no other choice. I dialed her number, my voice trembling, each ring a drumbeat of my mounting anxiety. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." She was silent for a few seconds, a pause that spoke volumes before answering. "Rosemary, what's going on? Did Julian do something?" I sighed, not wanting to get into the details over the phone, my pride bruised and raw. I just need to know the truth. Can you help me? Mrs. Miller, a woman of few words but profound intuition, agreed immediately. And just an hour later, I received a message from Thomas asking me to meet him at noon at a small cafe downtown. Mrs. Patterson, please don't worry. I will help you, he wrote. The message was short, but it was enough to give me a little relief. A lifeline in a sea of deceit. But what Thomas discovered next would reveal a betrayal so shocking, so unthinkable, that it would make me question everything I thought I knew about my own family. That I took out my own phone and with a silent, determined resolve snapped a picture of the receipt and the email. I didn't want to believe it, but a woman's intuition, a wife of 43 years' intuition, is a deep primal knowing. Something was going on and I had to find out what it was. My hands were trembling not just with anger, but with a deep existential dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to witness the spectacular collapse of my entire life. I went to the garage. Julian's old SUV was still warm, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and that faint sweet perfume from his clothes. I opened the door, a small cold dread gripping my stomach. I turned on my flashlight and checked every corner of the driver's seat. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just some loose change and an empty water bottle. But as I reached into the passenger side glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slippery. I pulled it out and my heart almost stopped. A tube of used personal lubricant with dried residue on the cap. A sticky, damning piece of evidence. I stood there in the dark garage, staring at it as if it were a dirty secret. A tangible manifestation of my worst fears. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He always said he was tired, that age had sapped his desire. So what was this lubricant for? The question echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to my fragile reality. I felt paralyzed but kept a clear head, a survival instinct kicking in. I put it back exactly where I'd found it. I wiped my hands with a napkin, scrubbing them raw, as if I were afraid the betrayal would leave a permanent mark on my skin. I continued searching, this time more carefully, more methodically. Under the back seat, I found some crumpled napkins soaked in a sweet floral perfume. The scent wasn't a man's fragrance and it wasn't my soft, familiar rose fragrance. The scent was alien, defiant. A loud, vulgar shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our garage. I took photos of everything. The lubricant, the napkins, as if I could capture the scent in an image. I closed the car and went back inside, the weight of the evidence pressing down on me, heavier than any flour sack I had ever lifted. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling uncontrollably as I picked up Julian's phone again. By this point, I was almost certain he was cheating on me. I checked his messages, but there were only work chats, cold and dry like a desert landscape. His inbox was empty, except for that one strange email. I checked the sent and draft folders. Nothing. Everything was too clean, too perfect, suspiciously so. As if he had erased every trace of his deception. A master of lies, I thought bitterly. My rage was now a cold, hard stone in my chest. And a new, more dangerous emotion began to stir within me. A desire for truth, a need to expose the lie, no matter the cost. The next morning, just as the sun rose and the soft light filtered through the window curtains, I was already awake. A ghost in my own house. The image of the lubricant, the restaurant receipt, and that email wouldn't stop swirling in my head. A venomous carousel of doubt. I stood in the kitchen, my hands busy, but my mind a frantic whirlwind. I made a simple breakfast. 2 fried eggs, some toast, and a cup of the strong black coffee Julian liked. I had barely slept all night. Julian came down looking tired, his hair a mess and his eyes still groggy. He sat at the table, grabbed his coffee cup, took a sip and set it down half full. "I have an important meeting today," he said in a husky voice. A rehearsed line he'd used countless times before without looking me in the eye. "I'm sure I'll be home late." He was so good at this, I thought. The easy lies, the casual tone. It made my blood run cold. I nodded with a strained smile, though all I wanted to do was scream. "Where is the meeting? With whom?" "In San Antonio again." But I held back, my rage a silent fire, and simply replied, "All right, be careful." He got up, gave me a light pat on the shoulder, a gesture that felt more like an afterthought than a sign of affection, and left. The door closed, leaving the kitchen in silence, and me with a suspicion that was growing into a monstrous certainty. I cleared the table and washed the dishes one by one. The rhythm of the task, a small anchor in the storm of my emotions. I couldn't just sit there inventing theories. I needed the truth, hard evidence. I picked up my phone and looked for the number for Mrs. Miller, a friend from years ago who had helped me so much when I first opened the bakery. She had once told me about a good private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. "Rosemary, if you ever need it, I can give you Thomas's number," she had said. "He's very discreet and reliable." I never thought I would need to call him, but now I had no other choice. I dialed her number, my voice trembling, each ring a drumbeat of my mounting anxiety. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." She was silent for a few seconds, a pause that spoke volumes before answering. "Rosemary, what's going on? Did Julian do something?" I sighed, not wanting to get into the details over the phone, my pride bruised and raw. "I just need to know the truth. Can you help me?" Mrs. Miller, a woman of few words but profound intuition, agreed immediately. And just an hour later, I received a message from Thomas asking me to meet him at noon at a small cafe downtown. "Mrs. Patterson, please don't worry. I will help you," he wrote. The message was short, but it was enough to give me a little relief. A lifeline in a sea of deceit. But what Thomas discovered next would reveal a betrayal so shocking, so unthinkable, that it would make me question everything I thought I knew about my own family. That I stayed in the bakery among trays of sweet pastries that smelled delicious, but I felt like my world was falling apart. I remembered the early days of the business when Julian would help me carry sacks of flour, when we would laugh together in that little kitchen. Our dreams as big as the sky. Now it all seemed like a distant memory, a beautiful lie I had lived for too long. The next morning, I was in the small kitchen of the bakery, holding a list of orders for a large hotel downtown. The smell of flour and vanilla, which always brought me peace, felt empty that day. A hollow comfort. As soon as I finished signing the delivery invoice, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I wiped my hands and my heart sank when I saw it was a message from the detective. Just a short sentence. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm sending you more evidence." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my hands trembled as I opened the message. A series of photos appeared on the screen. The first showed Julian in his usual gray shirt, leaving a law office near the main plaza. By his side was Stephanie in a beige office dress, her hair in a high ponytail, and huge dark sunglasses that almost covered her face. A pathetic attempt at anonymity. They were walking very close together, not like in-laws, but like a couple. Their bodies a testament to their forbidden bond. In the next photo, they were standing in front of a 4-star hotel with gleaming glass doors and a gold sign. I zoomed in, desperately looking for some sign to deny what I was seeing, but there was nothing. They looked too natural, too comfortable together. A part of a world I was not a part of. Then came a short video from Mr. Thomas. I pressed play and my heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. A frantic drum against my ribs. The shot was from a distance, but it was clear enough to see Julian and Stephanie on the third-floor balcony of the hotel. His arm was around her waist, and she was resting her head on his shoulder, her long hair moving softly in the wind. And then, like a stab, I saw them share a quick kiss without trying to hide. It was a brief kiss, but it was enough to burn away the last spark of hope I had left. I replayed the video frame by frame, each image digging deeper into my soul. A slow, agonizing descent into hell. The room curtain opened slightly, and Stephanie came out, running to hug Julian, her face lit up with happiness, as if she were a young girl in love. I slumped into the chair, clutching the edge of the table to keep from falling apart. Mr. Thomas wrote, "They also rented the room for the afternoon. It looks like they're staying the night. I'll keep an eye on them." I read the message over and over, my throat tight, as if I were being strangled. Just a few hours earlier, Julian had written to me, "Rosemary, I won't be home tonight. I have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." The tone was sweet and caring, just as it had been for years. But now I knew it was all a lie. A well-constructed lie. A potential partner from out of town. He wasn't out of town. He was here in a 4-star hotel with our own daughter-in-law. When I was sure Julian was asleep, my phone vibrated. It was a call from the detective, Mr. Thomas. His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if he feared someone would overhear him. "Mrs. Patterson, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. I used special equipment. They didn't even notice. I'm sending it to you now." My heart pounded hard, but I simply replied, "Thank you, Thomas. Send me the file." Minutes later, an audio file appeared in my messages. I put on my headphones, sat at the table, and pressed play. The first thing I heard was Stephanie's voice, cold and ambitious. A stranger's voice. Dad, hurry up with that fake contract. I want to have that whole chain of stores already. I want that old hag out of the house. I felt a blow to my chest and gripped the phone tightly. Then came Julian's voice, deep and confident. Don't worry about those papers. Rosemary doesn't know anything. Leave it in my hands. She trusts me too much. It felt like a knife twisting in my heart. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to take everything I had built. The bakery chain. All the sweat, tears, and sleepless nights. Baking every batch. Running all over town to make deliveries to keep my reputation. It was all mine. Julian never once got his hands dirty in the kitchen. He never worked the counter or signed contracts with hotels. And now he and Stephanie wanted to take it all away. To kick me out of the house I had made a home. That wretched old woman. That's what Stephanie called me. I remembered the days when she had just joined the family. When I taught her how to make rice, when I hugged her like a daughter. I thought she was part of the family, that she would be the woman who, along with Marcus, would build a future. And Julian, the man I had loved since I was a girl in Phoenix, who swore he would be with me until the end. They had made a joke of me, a fool who still believed in love and family. But they had underestimated one thing. A mother's love. And a mother's fury. That night I sat in my kitchen, staring at Julian's car keys on the counter. My hands stopped shaking. My mind became crystal clear. It was time to fight back. That night at dinner, I sat across from Julian in the small kitchen under the yellow light that gave his face a strange distorted glow. He ate and spoke in a monotone voice, as if nothing were wrong. As if the world wasn't about to end for him. Rosemary, I have to sign some important business papers this week. Maybe you should look them over. They're complicated. I picked up a piece of bread and pretended to take a bite, but in my head I could only hear Stephanie's voice from the recording. Dad, hurry up and sign the fake contracts. I knew he was testing the waters. He wanted to drag me into his dirty plan. I gave him a dry smile, a facade of a wife who was too tired to argue, and replied, Yes, I'll look at them later. I'm tired now. He nodded, took a sip of wine, looking at me as if nothing were wrong. But I knew that behind that smile was a man ready to take everything I had built. A predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Julian had a few more glasses of wine. His face turned red, and he started slurring his words about a difficult client he'd seen that day. I nodded as if I were listening, but inside I wanted to scream. Do you think I'm that stupid? When he got up, staggering, and went to the bedroom, I cleared the table, my every move slow, containing the anger that was boiling inside me. He threw himself on the bed, snoring loudly, and left his car keys on the nightstand, gleaming under the dim light. A siren's call to my revenge. I stared at them, my heart pounding in my chest. This was my chance, my moment. I entered the bedroom slowly, careful not to make a sound. Every step felt like walking between pain and resolve, between the past and a new unknown future. I grabbed the keys, squeezed them tight, and went straight to the garage. The night was quiet, hushed, as if the world was holding its breath. All I could hear were crickets outside. They're chirping a soundtrack to my silent fury. I turned on my phone's flashlight. The weak light illuminated Julian's old SUV, a silent accomplice in his betrayal. I opened the door. The smell of gasoline was still there, mixed with a strange sweet perfume. I opened the glove compartment between the seats, and there it was. The tube of lubricant with a loose cap and dried residue on the edge. A monument to their infidelity. I held it in my hand, feeling like I was holding a dirty secret. It was clear they had used it again. As if it were confirmation that Julian and Stephanie were still playing their secret game. Their twisted little dance. I took the tube of lubricant to the kitchen, placed it on the counter, and washed my hands with lemon soap. I scrubbed them thoroughly as if to erase every trace of the betrayal I had just touched. The fresh scent didn't calm my anger, but it helped me stay focused. I opened the tool drawer and took out a tube of clear industrial superglue, the same kind I once used to fix a chair at the bakery. It was a tool of my trade, now a weapon of my revenge. I carefully unscrewed the cap of the lubricant and filled the tube with the glue, drop by drop, until it was completely full. I wiped the nozzle, shook it gently to mix it, and tested it a little. It came out smoothly, just like the original lubricant. At a glance, no one would notice the difference. I smiled faintly, though a hurricane was raging inside me. This wasn't a game. It was the first step to getting justice. I put the tube back in the glove compartment, adjusted the floor mat and the seat just as they were, as if no one had touched anything before closing the car. I opened the trunk to check. There were only crumpled bags, an empty water bottle, and an unused condom lying in a corner. My heart skipped a beat, but I wasn't surprised anymore. I took pictures with my phone, adding them to the growing collection of evidence. Each image was another piece, a reminder that I couldn't let Julian and Stephanie get away with their lies. Back in the house, I put the keys back in their place next to Julian's alarm clock. I grabbed an old book and sat on the living room sofa pretending to read. The dim light fell on the pages, but I couldn't read a word. My head was spinning. I thought of Marcus, my son, who believed he was living happily with Stephanie without knowing the truth. How could I tell him that his wife and his own father were betraying us? I thought of the bakery chain, of the 43 years of work and sleepless nights, of all the fights with Julian to defend my dream. He never really understood it, but I trusted that he supported me. Now I knew he was just waiting for the right moment to take everything. An hour later, Julian woke up and stumbled into the kitchen for water. He saw the keys on the counter and didn't suspect a thing. "Still not sleeping, Rosemary?" he asked groggily. I smiled and replied, "No, I'm just reading a bit. Finish your water and go back to bed." He nodded, drank, and returned to the bedroom, snoring immediately. I looked at him as if he were a stranger. This man, who once promised to be with me until the end, was now planning to destroy what I loved most. But he didn't know that I had already started my counterattack. And tomorrow, when he and Stephanie met for their secret rendezvous, they would discover that some betrayals come with consequences they never imagined. At dawn, I got up. The sunlight was timidly entering through the bakery window. I was in my usual kitchen, kneading dough, preparing sweet pastries for a large hotel order. I pressed the dough with all my might, channeling my rage into every movement. When I returned home for breakfast, I made an effort to keep a calm face. Julian was already up with a cup of black coffee in his hand. I served him eggs and toast. "Julian," I said calmly, "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract with a new partner. I'm sure I'll be home late. Can you take care of dinner?" I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He looked up surprised, but in his eyes something was shining that wasn't concern. It was relief. "A big contract?" he asked, taking my hand with feigned tenderness. "Don't worry. Go ahead. I'll handle it." But that spark in his eyes, that slight curve of his lips, as if a weight had been lifted, pierced my chest. He wanted me to leave, and I knew exactly why. I smiled and nodded. "Thanks. I'll call you if I get back late." He took another sip of coffee. Then he got up saying he had to get to the office early. As he left, I saw he had left his phone on the table, and the screen lit up with a missed call. The name that appeared was S. I frowned. My heart pounded. Stephanie. I was sure it was her. Before I could touch the phone, Julian came back, grabbed it in a hurry, and turned off the screen in front of me. "I forgot it," he mumbled with a forced smile. And he was gone. I stood there watching the door close, feeling as if I had been slapped. He wasn't even bothering to hide it anymore. That day, I worked like a machine, delivering bread, signing invoices, and smiling at customers. But my mind was only focused on Julian and Stephanie. I couldn't let them continue their farce behind my back and Marcus's. I needed more evidence to hear from their own mouths what they said when they thought no one was listening. That night, I pretended to be tired. I went to bed early and told Julian, "I have to wake up early tomorrow to catch the bus, so I'm going to sleep." He nodded, gave me a pat on the shoulder. "Rest, Rosemary. Be careful on your trip tomorrow." I lay down and closed my eyes, but I sharpened my hearing, attentive to every sound in the house. Close to midnight, when Julian's snoring stopped, I heard him get out of bed quietly. The faint light from his phone shone in the darkness. He left the room with his phone, thinking I was asleep. I stayed still, my heart pounding. Then I slowly got up and followed him on tiptoe. I hid behind the thick living room curtain and saw him standing in a dark corner near the window. He put the phone to his ear and spoke softly. "Yes, of course. Come over to the house tomorrow. We won't have to go to a hotel anymore. Rosemary has to leave town to sign a contract and she'll be back late." I heard a soft giggle from the other side. Stephanie's sweet voice. "That's great, Dad. Finally, we can relax." Julian laughed, replying, "Yeah, come early. I'll be waiting." I stood there behind the curtain, feeling my blood boil. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to turn my house, my son's home, and mine into their meeting place. I returned to the bedroom in silence, opened a drawer, and took out Marcus's old recorder, the one I bought him for college to record his classes. I checked the battery, put in a new one, and turned on continuous recording. I hid it behind the bookshelf in the bedroom next to the headboard, certain it would capture everything. I carefully adjusted the cable and covered it with a family photo frame. The photo of the four of us at Marcus and Stephanie's wedding. Looking at it, I felt a bitter taste. Stephanie's smile, Julian's hug. Now they were all lies. Before going back to bed, I checked again that the recorder was working. I placed the photo frame just right to hide the cable. Then I lay down, pretending to be asleep. Julian came back to the bedroom, threw himself on the bed, and snored as if nothing were wrong. But my eyes were wide open in the darkness, more awake than ever. I reached for the clock and set the alarm for earlier than usual. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep. I was ready for the next step of my plan. I woke up at 5 in the morning when it was still dark. Only the faint light from the street lights was coming through the window. The house was silent. All I could hear was Julian's steady snoring from the bedroom. I was in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee in my hand, staring at the skillet of oil that was already on the stove. It was the last step of my plan, a simple smoke trap, but enough to expose the truth. I tied a thin string to the stove's igniter. I ran it over to the window and attached it to a heavy object, an old coffee can I found in the cabinet. All I had to do was pull it from a distance, and the flame would ignite the oil, creating thick black smoke, enough to alarm the neighbors. I opened the window by the stove a little, so the smoke could get out. Then I tested it once. The smoke rose quickly, forming spirals like a warning. I turned it off immediately, checked everything again, and made sure not to leave any trace that might make Julian suspicious. I put on a jacket, grabbed my large purse, and pretended to be leaving for my trip. Before I left, I went into the bedroom and gently shook Julian. I have to go to the bus station right now, I said in a calm voice. I'm going to sign a contract. I'll probably be back late tonight. He opened his eyes and in a sleepy voice replied, All right, be careful, Rosemary. Call me if you need anything. Then he buried his face in his pillow and went back to sleep. I looked at the man I once loved and trusted, now lying there unaware of the trap waiting for him. I turned away, my heart heavy, but my legs steady. Instead of going to the station, I went across the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. She was my neighbor and my friend. She opened the door and looked at me, worried, when she saw my purse. Rosemary, what are you doing up so early? Is something wrong? She asked with affection. I forced a smile. Mrs. Peterson, can I stay here for a few hours? I need to watch my house. She frowned, but didn't say anything else. She poured me a hot cup of coffee and gave me a chair by the window. From there, I could see the entrance to my house where Julian and Stephanie would enter, and where the truth would be revealed. But what happened next would exceed even my wildest expectations for revenge. Around 10 a.m., a taxi pulled up in front of the house. Stephanie got out wearing a light floral dress and dark sunglasses, as if she were afraid someone would recognize her. Julian opened the door, looked around in a hurry, and quickly ushered her inside. I gripped my coffee cup tightly, my heart pounding in my chest. It's time, I murmured and turned on the app on my phone connected to the hidden recorder I had left in the bedroom. The sound started coming through my headphones. Stephanie's laughter, the clinking of glasses, heavy footsteps. Then I heard Julian's deep voice. All right, we don't have to hide in a hotel anymore. Stephanie laughed. You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right? I bit my lips, holding back the rage as I listened to her call me the old hag with so much contempt. Then the bed started to creak along with other sounds I didn't want to keep listening to. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and told myself, just a little longer, Rosemary. Just a little longer. A few minutes later, suddenly Stephanie screamed, What the hell is this? We're stuck. Her voice was filled with panic, almost sobbing. Julian growled, Shut up. Wait, let me see. I smiled. I barely touched my phone and activated the smoke trap remotely. The string pulled hard. The stove ignited. The skillet of oil caught fire. Black smoke billowed out of the kitchen window in thick spirals, spreading outside like an alarm signal. Mrs. Peterson gasped. She looked out the window. Rosemary, your house is on fire. I pretended to be scared, but inside I felt strangely calm. Neighbors started coming out into their yards, shouting, Rosemary's house is on fire. Call the firefighters. A man nearby, Mr. Miller, quickly took out his phone and called the city fire department. I stayed there, holding my coffee cup tightly, my eyes fixed on my house. Everything was going according to plan. In my headphones, Stephanie's voice sounded more and more desperate. Julian, do something. I can't move. Julian's voice roared. Don't scream. I'm trying. But I knew they couldn't do anything. The industrial superglue I had swapped was already at work, leaving them trapped at their most humiliating moment. I imagined them struggling, scared, and a part of me felt satisfied. Not because I was cruel, but because they had pushed me to this. They wanted to take my bakery, my family, even my honor. Now I would make them pay. I looked out the window. The smoke continued to rise, getting thicker. The neighbors were crowding together, yelling in a panic. What's going on? Someone asked. Where's Rosemary? She went out of town for work. That's what I heard. Another replied. Mrs. Peterson, standing next to me, looked at me with suspicious eyes, but didn't say anything. She just squeezed my hand gently. I knew she had a hunch, but I didn't need to give her an explanation. The truth was about to explode, and I was ready. Just 10 minutes later, the siren of a fire truck sounded at the end of the street like a death knell. The red vehicle sped up and skidded to a stop in front of my house. I saw Marcus jump out of the truck in his firefighter uniform. My heart broke for a moment. My poor son had no idea what he was about to discover. The firefighters rushed into the house with their axes and hoses, ready to battle the blaze. But what they found instead was something no training could have prepared them for. Through the smoke, they heard Julian and Stephanie screaming for help from the bedroom. When the firefighters broke down the bedroom door, they found my husband and my daughter-in-law stuck together in the most compromising position imaginable. The industrial superglue had done its job perfectly. They were literally attached to each other, unable to separate, their faces red with embarrassment and panic. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face a mixture of confusion, horror, and dawning realization. Dad? Stephanie? What? What are you doing? It's not what it looks like. Julian shouted desperately. But it was exactly what it looked like. The fire chief called for an ambulance. We need medical assistance. We have 2 adults who appear to be adhesively attached to each other. Word spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. People gathered outside my house, pointing and whispering. Some took photos and videos with their phones. By evening, the story would be all over social media. The cheating father-in-law and daughter-in-law who got stuck together. The paramedics had to use a special solvent to separate Julian and Stephanie. The process took over an hour, during which time the entire neighborhood watched in fascination and horror. Marcus's face was pale with shock. He kept looking at his father and his wife as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. How long has this been going on? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Neither Julian nor Stephanie could answer. They were too busy crying from the pain of the separation and the humiliation of being caught. When they finally managed to separate Julian and Stephanie, they were both taken to the hospital for treatment. The industrial superglue had caused chemical burns on their skin that would take weeks to heal. But their wounds were nothing compared to what was coming next. Because I had recorded everything, and I was ready to use it. As I watched from Mrs. Peterson's window, the ambulance arrived to take Julian and Stephanie to the hospital. The chemical burns from the industrial superglue would require serious medical treatment. But their physical wounds were nothing compared to the emotional devastation about to unfold. Marcus stood in our driveway, still in his firefighter uniform, looking lost and broken. The man he had always looked up to, his father, had betrayed not only me but him as well. And his wife, the woman he loved, had been living a lie for months, maybe years. I couldn't watch my son suffer like this anymore. I crossed the street and walked up to him. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought you were out of town." "I was never going out of town, sweetheart," I said gently. "I've been investigating your father's betrayal for weeks." Marcus looked at me with confusion and pain. "You knew? You knew about Dad and Stephanie." "I had suspicions, but I needed proof." "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." That evening, while Julian and Stephanie were still in the hospital getting treated for their burns, I sat Marcus down at my kitchen table. I showed him everything. The photos from the private investigator, the audio recordings of their conversations, the evidence of their plan to steal my bakery chain. They were going to take everything from us, I explained. Your father wanted to kick me out of my own home. Stephanie called me, that old hag behind my back. Marcus listened in stunned silence, his hands trembling as he looked at each piece of evidence. When I played the audio recording where they plotted to steal my business, tears rolled down his cheeks. I trusted her, he whispered. I loved her. How could she do this to us? Because some people only care about money, I replied. But you, my dear son, you're nothing like them. You have integrity and honor. 3 days later, Julian came home from the hospital with bandages covering the chemical burns on his skin. He walked into our house like nothing had happened, as if he could still pretend to be the loving husband. Rosemary, he said, we need to talk about what happened. It was all a misunderstanding. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a manila envelope in front of me. I looked at him calmly. No, Julian. There's no misunderstanding. I know everything. His face went pale. What do you mean? I opened the envelope and spread out the photos from Thomas, Julian and Stephanie holding hands, kissing on the hotel balcony, walking out of the law office together. I mean, I know about your affair with our daughter-in-law. I know about your plan to steal my bakery chain. I know about the fake contracts you were preparing. Julian staggered backward as if I had slapped him. Rosemary, I can explain. There's nothing to explain, I interrupted. I have it all recorded. Every word you and Stephanie said about getting rid of the old hag. Every detail of your conspiracy to take my life's work. I stood up and handed him another envelope. These are divorce papers. I've already filed them. You have 48 hours to move out of my house. You can't do this, Julian shouted, his face turning red with rage. Half of everything belongs to me. This house, the bakery, all of it. I smiled coldly. Actually, Julian, according to my lawyer, adultery changes everything. Especially when that adultery involves conspiracy to commit fraud. You won't get a penny. I'll fight this in court, he threatened. Please do, I replied. I'd love for a judge to hear those recordings. I'd love for the whole town to see those photos. But I don't think Stephanie's husband will be very happy about that, do you? At that moment, Marcus walked through the front door. He had been staying with me since the incident. He looked at his father with disgust. Get out, Marcus said quietly. Get out of Mom's house and don't come back. Marcus, son, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Marcus cut him off. You're a cheater and a thief. You betrayed Mom and you betrayed me. I don't have a father anymore. Julian looked between us, seeing that his family was truly lost. With nowhere left to turn, he packed his bags and left that very night. Stephanie tried to come to the house the next day, but I was ready for her too. I had changed all the locks, and when she rang the doorbell, I spoke to her through the intercom. You're not welcome here, I said simply. Rosemary, please let me explain, she begged. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The only thing you need to explain is to your husband, and to the divorce lawyer he's already hired. Through the security camera, I watched Stephanie break down crying on my front porch. But I felt no sympathy for her. She had made her choice when she decided to betray my son and steal from my family. Within 2 weeks, both Julian and Stephanie were served with divorce papers. Marcus filed for divorce citing adultery and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming, and neither Julian nor Stephanie had any defense. The scandal spread through our small town like wildfire. Everyone knew what had happened. The firefighters who had to separate them. The neighbors who watched the whole drama unfold. The hospital staff who treated their burns. Julian became a laughingstock. Stephanie lost her job at the bank when the story went viral on social media. Their reputations were destroyed, and their lives were in ruins. But my life? My life was just beginning again. 6 months later. I stood in the kitchen of my expanded bakery, watching my team of 5 bakers prepare orders for the morning rush. My business had not only survived Julian's betrayal, it had thrived. The scandal that was supposed to destroy me had actually brought me more customers than ever. People from 3 towns over would drive to my bakery, curious to meet the woman who had outsmarted her cheating husband with industrial superglue. You're a legend, customers would say with admiration. You showed that no one messes with a strong woman. The story had gone viral on social media. Local news stations had interviewed me. I'd even been invited to appear on a national morning show to talk about standing up to family betrayal. But the best part wasn't the fame or the increased business. The best part was my relationship with Marcus. My son had moved back in with me after his divorce from Stephanie was finalized. He helped me run the bakery, and we worked side by side just like I had once dreamed of doing with Julian. Mom, Marcus said one morning as we prepared the daily inventory, I owe you an apology. I looked at him with surprise. For what, sweetheart? For not seeing what Dad and Stephanie were doing. For not protecting you the way you protected me. I put down my mixing bowl and took his hands in mine. Marcus, you have nothing to apologize for. You trusted the people you loved. That shows you have a good heart. But they betrayed us both. Yes, they did. But their betrayal revealed something important. It showed me how strong I really am. And it brought us closer together. Marcus smiled, his eyes filling with tears. I'm proud to be your son. And I'm proud to be your mother. As for Julian and Stephanie, their lives had completely fallen apart. Julian had to move into a small apartment across town. No one would hire him because everyone knew about the scandal. He tried to start his own business, but no one trusted him anymore. Stephanie lost her job at the bank and had to move back in with her parents. The photos and videos of her and Julian being separated by firefighters had made it impossible for her to find work anywhere in town. They had both become social outcasts, whispered about and pointed at wherever they went. I heard through the grapevine that they weren't even speaking to each other anymore. Apparently, they blamed each other for the whole mess. Julian had tried to contact me several times, begging for forgiveness and asking for another chance. But I had learned an important lesson about self-respect. Some people, I would tell my customers when they asked about it, think they can take advantage of kindness. They mistake generosity for weakness. But there's a difference between being loving and being a doormat. 1 year after the incident, I received a letter from Julian. He was moving to another state, he wrote. He couldn't stand the shame anymore. He wanted me to know that he was sorry and that he realized he had destroyed the best thing in his life. I read the letter once and then threw it in the trash. I had built a new life, and there was no room in it for people who had proven they couldn't be trusted. The bakery was now the most successful business in town. I had opened a second location and was considering a third. Marcus had become my business partner, and we were planning to expand into catering for weddings and special events. But more than the business success, I had gained something even more valuable. I had gained respect for myself. I had learned that I didn't need someone else to complete me. I didn't need to accept betrayal and disrespect in order to keep a marriage together. I had learned that sometimes the people who love us the most are the ones we least expect. Mrs. Peterson still came by every morning for coffee and pastries. She had become one of my closest friends, and she never tired of hearing customers praise my courage. That's my girl, she would say proudly. Don't mess with Rosemary Patterson. The private investigator, Thomas, had become a regular customer too. He told me that my case had become legendary in his profession. Most people just want evidence for their divorce, he said. But you wanted justice. You planned the perfect revenge. Even the firefighters who had responded that day would stop by occasionally. They'd laugh about the most unusual call they'd ever received. We've seen car accidents, house fires, medical emergencies, one of them said. But we'd never seen two people glued together like that. As I locked up the bakery each evening, I would think about how much my life had changed. A year ago, I was a woman who was being betrayed and lied to by the people closest to her. Now I was a successful businesswoman, a beloved member of my community, and most importantly, a woman who knew her own worth. I had learned that betrayal, as painful as it is, can sometimes be a gift. It can show us who people really are, can teach us to value ourselves, and it can give us the strength to build something even better than what we lost. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support.